Welcome to the Illuminating Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Marcia Ryan Welton, and I'm a lawyer, business strategist, corporate trainer, and executive coach. Each week, I'm going to bring you my favorite entrepreneurs, thought leaders, legal professionals, and other coaches who will inspire, educate, and empower you. Join us in our latest episode as we navigate the intricate intersections of tech, humanities, and AI regulation with tech luminary Stephanie Sylvester. Hear about the connection between the Renaissance and AI, the hype and reality surrounding AI's dangers, and the transformative power of democratizing knowledge. Learn about her friend garden that reaped her an astonishing $1 million in free startup services, launching Avatar Buddy, the AI mentor revolutionizing personal and professional growth. Don't miss her valuable insights from the art of war and a special offer at the end. Hit download and share today. Now on to the episode. Stephanie, it's great to have you here. You and I do know each other, and I know quite a bit about your business and your past and your history, but I'm really excited to bring you to the world because you have a really unique path. So you are obviously a female. You're from Belize. You've had 30 years of experience in the tech and IT industry. What advice would you have, as people are saying you should go into STEM careers and humanities are dead, which could be the story of another podcast. But what advice do you have for people that might want to follow that non-traditional path? Because you've been in tech for a long time as a woman of color, and that wasn't so common. It's more common now, but still not that common. So what's the advice you would give to people who are thinking of going into a career like this, especially if they come from a non-traditional background?
First thing I would say, thank you for having me on. I'm super excited. I can't wait to hear and have this amazing discussion. The second thing I want to say is I would say go into the humanities. So people are saying humanities are dead, but actually that's not true. Um, to be a great technologist, you actually have to be creative. You have to be able to know. You have to think differently, and humanities allows you and trains your brain to think differently, to 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 understand different topics. So I actually have a master's in Latin American studies and economic development, and one of the things that made me uber successful in the tech space was the fact that I am a trained negotiator, I'm a trained troubleshooter. So whenever I was on a team, I could very instinctively say, let's troubleshoot this. And I remember once this guy, he spent 7 hours troubleshooting a problem, could not figure out the problem. I got on the phone with him. 20 minutes later, we found what the problem was. And that was because I'm trained negotiator, all my international relations skills I brought to bear. So I would actually say if you want to get a computer science degree or an engineering degree, also have a minor in one of the arts. That will give you a well-rounded thing. And one other thing I would say is every team that I've been on, we've had enough people to create a band. Most of the computer science things work related with math also is people are really good with that, are very good with some kind of musical instrument, and they actually
Really?
one team we could actually, we had two bands. Actually, we could have done two bands, but for the most part they have these artistic sides.
That's really interesting. I think most people don't think about that. And music, the studies are very clear about how music affects the brain, affects your creativity. It's why it's so unfortunate that there's not enough music in schools. People think it's just some frivolous kind of a thing, but it really does affect the brain. And I'm glad you said that about the humanities. I know you have a degree from University of Miami, and I teach at University of Miami. And actually next semester, I'm teaching to freshmen, well, they'll be sophomores, a class about ethics and technology, because it's a new program that the provost has put in place, innovation, technology, and design, housed in the School of Engineering, but it's a cross-functional group of professors. So they are getting the humanities. They're also learning how to code Python and that kind of stuff, but they're getting the humanities, and it's so important. So I'm glad that you said humanities aren't dead. Now, your latest project deals with artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI. And my listeners have heard from Mitch Jackson, who's a lawyer who deals in this space. He's been thinking about metaverse, NFTs, AI for years and years. And he's trying to get lawyers and business people to understand and not to be scared of AI. and you have been in the space for much longer than most people have even heard of AI. One of the things that Mitch does in his book is he says, I'm going to explain it to you like a fourth grader. So I'd like you to explain generative AI, and is there another kind of AI? I know the answer to this question. Um, like you're talking to a fourth grader.
I love this question because what it does is it gives me a great entryway into explaining that there's so many different types of AI, and we need to be
Mm-hmm.
careful that we don't lump everything together. It's AI is just like doctors. You don't just have one doctor. So you don't just go
Right.
doctors suck or doctors are amazing. What you do is you
Right.
say um, this type of doctor, I don't know about it, and it's the same thing with AI. So generative AI, in a very simple thing, is it takes information where there's a lot of it on the internet, and it converts it into knowledge for you. And that's
Mm-hmm.
been a big difference with the AI in the internet space, is that we have had a lot of access to information, but if you don't have the context in which to process that information, then it's almost useless. And generative AI really takes that and turn it into knowledge. So a fourth grader understands, they can read a seventh grader book because they can read really well. But if they didn't have the context of what the seventh grader learned in the fifth and sixth grade, the
Mm-hmm.
information means nothing to them. And that's what generative
Right.
AI does. It says, oh, you're in the fourth grade, you're reading this thing, you can read it really well, but do you understand what it is? Generative AI makes it so that you can understand it.
Right. And so it's different from search, right? Because search is one thing. And this is one of the things that people say is a potential danger of generative AI. Because if you go on Google, you search, it's going to give you links to information. Whereas let's use ChatGPT 4, which is where we are right now, as of the time we're recording. It could be by the time this comes out, ChatGPT 6, who knows, because it's changing by the minute. But what that does is it actually gives you an quote answer, which may be wrong, right? Because you've got the hallucinations where it'll come up with something sounding completely amazing. And I don't know if you saw in the newspaper 2 days ago, I don't know how this lawyer did this. This lawyer wrote this whole brief using ChatGPT 4 with all kinds of beautiful cases submitted to the court, and none of the cases were real. And he didn't even look them up. So that's a whole other problem from an ethics perspective. And I hope if I have any law students or young lawyers listening, they know please don't ever do that because you'll be shamed all over the universe forever. But isn't that, so the fourth grader reads this, says, oh, now I know the answer. How do we know when it's really the answer and not something they made up? Because this is where context comes into play.
So, um, every time I explain this, I say, I don't know if you had an older sibling. I had an older brother, and one of the things that he loved doing as teenagers would be us and our friends. He would like say something, and he would have just enough facts in it, and then we had to decide whether or not it was true. And we would spend the afternoon arguing. I mean, this is back in the day when there was no Google, no internet, and that was our enjoyment. Well, what I did was it caused me to research more. I had to ask my parents. I had to read more, and I would say, "Tell me where you read that," and then I would go read it to see if what he said was true. And so I'm excited about generative AI because it forces us to go back to critical thinking and creativity, something that we have slowly moved away from. But that's what we need to be fulfilled human beings. Critical thinking, creativity, where you're like trying to figure out if this is true or not. And I tell people, when you use these tools, you have to reference, you have to validate that what they said is true. It's the same thing that you're supposed to be doing anyway. And I read that article and I was like, whoa, like not one of the things you reference. When I get a reference, the first thing I do, if it says according to, I go and I Google it to see if that even exists. And then
Right,
the second thing is I go to the website and I say, can I find what it said? Can I find that on the website? So
right.
I think that it's incumbent upon us to reference our source. We have been referencing our source before. We should not change that.
Excellent. Now, you've been in this game for a long time. Not to say that you're old, to say that you're a pioneer.
That's okay.
Did OpenAI and did Google release their generative AI products to the public too soon? You've seen that you can't go a day without some AI expert, godfather, grandfather coming out and saying, the end of humanity is upon us. Did they release it too soon? And now you've had a relationship with OpenAI, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But objectively, because I think you can say this from a perspective that's not like the doomsayer, um, but we do have some real experts coming out and saying we should either put a halt on this, or we came out too fast, and now it's the time where we've really got to bring it back. What are your thoughts on that?
So one of the things that I did in my career was IT quality. So I worked at a lot of corporations where we had to test, and
Mm-hmm.
I started my career first actually testing, and then coming up with testing strategy, and then coming up with IT strategy that incorporated testing. So you can test and test and test and test as much as you want in a lab, but
Right.
labs don't have real world impact. And so you have to release it into the world. And I will say that the way OpenAI has gone about releasing has been very responsible. They have
Mm-hmm.
they first they had developers use their tool. We've been working with OpenAI since 2021, and then they released it, and there's a lot of disclaimers in there, and it very clearly in simple English, not legal jargon, where it's like a like 10 pages long where nobody reads. It's simple English. Hey, this is what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing. So I think that was a very responsible way. And so I don't think that it was too early. I think it was right when it needed to be. I do agree that generative AI could spell doomsday, but not for the reasons that people are saying. And I we can get into that a little bit later on in the conversation. It's not the way it is people are professing it to be.
Well, it's really not the generative AI that people are so worried about, right? It's other types of AI. And you alluded to this earlier in the conversation that all AI, the general public, all they hear is generative AI, even if they even know the word generative, or they just say it's AI, it's going to take over, robots are going to do everything, we're all going to be, amoebas, and we're done. But there's different types of AI. So what's the, we don't want to get to it later. Let's get to it right
Okay.
now, because people are like, really? She knows what's going to kill us all? Tell us now. So what is the type of AI that people are more concerned about and should be more concerned about?
Well, I think just staying in the generative AI space,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know much about the AI that work that's being done in the weapon space. That
Right.
creates alarm for
Right.
me, um, because I've seen where you develop a piece of software for
Mm.
well intended, and
Right.
the users just bastardize it. I mean, one
Mm-hmm.
example is that labor scheduling tool. When that came out, the way that was designed, that was supposed to make life wonderful and beautiful. And this is again right why you need to test things in the general public, because we just tested in
Right.
the lab, and everybody that was testing had the same understanding of how it was supposed to use. Put it out there, people use that tool to penalize and abuse their employees.
Yeah.
And so going back to generative AI, where I'm very concerned about is that most times when we release technology, the middle class and upper middle class gets the first round access,
Mm-hmm.
and after it's fully baked and you're good to go, then we bring in the marginalized community. And this time around, if we do that same approach, then we are going to get to a reverse renaissance back to the dark ages, where people that depend on low wage jobs will have to fight for
Mm-hmm.
those jobs, and a sense of hopelessness will take over. And then we're going to have anarchy and conflicts at a local, like a personal level, that would
Yes.
eventually spell the end of humanity. So that I'm very concerned about. So my thing
The
is,
haves and the have-nots, basically.
exactly, but it's going to be more. I mean, it's just going to be so polarizing. It's just going to be,
Yes.
and you say, like, where do I get that information from? How did I come to that? Well, my my master's in Latin American studies, my master's in
Hmm.
economic development, the fact that I was two classes shy of a art history minor, and I studied the
Hmm.
Renaissance period, so I understand how the
Right.
whole Renaissance and Reformation happened. Um, is the reason why I can get to that. And so when you hear people talk about doomsday, one, they never ever say anything specific about
Hmm.
what's going to happen. And secondly, they're never talking about it from this perspective. And as much as we want to look at it, there is more marginalized people than not. And if you have a
Yes.
world where they've lost all hope, then
Right.
the way they're going to interact with the people that have hope is going to be such that we will have anarchy and destruction. And so that, for that, I'm very concerned. So I say yes, I agree that this tool is very powerful, can be very dangerous if not deployed appropriately. And one of the first things that we have to do is make sure that people from marginalized community that is usually overlooked are part of the development process, have input, and that we design it with them in mind.
Now, okay, two things, right? I'm so glad you said that, because I wonder if people that are making the regulations really ever study history. Every revolution has happened because of this, right? The haves and the have nots, people in power and everybody else at the bottom. And knowledge is power and information is power. But you're talking about people with low wage jobs may have to scramble. The headlines right now are about the knowledge workers, right? The software engineers. Now you got to be a prompt engineer, right? The lawyers, the doctors, the fact that, that ChatGPT 4 was able to get, a 90% passage on a bar exam and on medical entry exams. So what does this mean for the knowledge workers? And should knowledge workers be scared or excited?
Okay, so who put the prompt in Chat GPT to pass the exam?
Mm. Right.
I just want to start with that question. Is
Right. Hmm.
sit that for a moment. So we're talking like these tools can work themselves. They don't work themselves.
Right.
They need human
Right.
beings to work themselves. And I will tell you, when I was demoing my product, so I was demoing my product to an early childhood expert. So I type in a little thing because I know a little bit about childcare, and it gave me something, and it was like rather response was rather rudimentary, and the child care expert was about to dismiss my response, like, this tool doesn't work. So I said, you give me the prompt. So she tells me what to write in there. I write that, what she told me in it. The response was like night and day. So you
Right.
will still need humans to use the tool
Hmm.
because the tool can't use
Right.
itself. um,
Excellent.
I do think that there are lots of white collar jobs that are redundant and
Hmm.
don't bring as much value as they're compensated for, and that's where that stuff is going to start getting addressed. I also think that people that have been in the marginalized communities are now
And
going to
let's
be able.
define marginalized, by the way, because you've used that word a few times, and I know you have a very specific definition for it. So let's
Yeah,
make sure
so
we're on the same page.
marginalized for me is low income and people with disabilities.
Okay.
And so they have been left behind numerous times, not included. But if you give them the
Mm-hmm.
tool, so now I have the tool and you have the tool, and I am good in technology and you're a great lawyer. If I write technology prompts, my prompts will be night and day better than yours. You write
Right.
legal prompts, your prompts will be
Right.
better than mine night and day. So now imagine somebody that's uber smart but just haven't gotten the right opportunities like we have. Haven't gotten the
Right.
access. The planets didn't align for them the way it aligned for us. They now can use this tool to really amplify their knowledge and start navigating around and get into the
Right.
next point. And that's where I see, like, we've been talking about economic development for hundreds of years, hundreds and hundreds and
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of years, centuries. And this tool actually has the ability on a large scale to give people access at a very reasonable price, so that we are no longer regulated to our success is determined by our zip code, or we happen to
Right.
have some parents that after working three jobs still have energy left to make sure that you get into the best school that you can possibly get
Right.
into. I mean, those are all like really like high stakes things. You're now going to be where even if your parents are working three jobs, there's a tool to help you navigate through. And I
So let's talk about your product, Avatar Buddy. And this is something I know about. I've seen it and I've seen you iterate and pivot many times. And I know you pivot intentionally. So tell us about Avatar Buddy, where you do use AI, right? And why you built it, who it's for, and what were the gaps you were trying to fill?
So we started about 7 years ago thinking about this, and so just as context, OpenAI started in 2015. We started thinking about this in 2016, and
Mhm.
back then most technologists were like, "Sorry, Stephanie, what you're trying to do is not possible. There's no technology out there." And I was insistent that if I could think about it, it can be there. It can be created. And then we got our product built in 2021. And why did I start doing this? Well, I my
First, tell people what the product does, and
yes,
then we can talk
okay.
about why.
So what the product does is we've taken about five different AI engines and integrated them and put some custom code algorithms in, and allows somebody to ask a question or get support if they're feeling down, if they're feeling sad, even if they're feeling happy. They're going to an event, they don't know how to navigate the space. All of those little things, right? Those are the little, it's the little small things that keep you back from getting the next promotion. You inadvertently say something that annoys your manager doesn't say anything to you. So you're thinking everything is good. It's time for a promotion. Your manager remembers that, says, no, you're not qualified. End of the year review, you've crushed it, and you don't get a good review, or you get just like an okay review. And we all know that reviews are tied, bonuses are tied to review. So instead of getting like 20% or 25% of your salary for on a bonus, you're getting 10%. That's a meaningful difference, right? And so our tool uh, talks to you just like you would talk to a human, and you say, hey, this is what happened.
Yeah.
um
So I pick up the phone. So I've got my phone here.
and
I go into Avatar Buddy. Is it an app? What is it?
it's an optimized mobile website, and we did that intentionally because people don't want to put another software solution, and also generative AI. The way it works has been like a challenge to create an app. Like you just heard, OpenAI just released an app, but it's in a very limited space because
Yeah,
it's very
I'm using it.
difficult
Yeah.
to create an app
Mhm.
for that. And then you talk to it, you type in whatever it is, you ask it whatever question, and we're our tools designed for students, so help them with their academic. Um, explain to me what a Pythagoras or explain to me what an isosceles triangle is, or
And I
um,
still don't know the answer to that question. But go ahead.
and then as an employee, I don't remember how to do my job, because when I got trained, they gave me so much information all at once, and I was overwhelmed. I'm nervous. I mean, the normal emotions. So what we did was say we want a tool that addresses the hard skill and soft skills of success, and that's what we do. And you don't even have to know if this problem that I'm experiencing is a soft skill or a hard skill problem. It figures it out for you. And we have we
So what would I type in? So I pick up the phone. Give me an example of what I would actually type in.
okay. I,
I
I'm
would type in,
I'm a new super. I'm a new. I just got promoted. I'm a supervisor, and my friends are now making fun of me. They won't listen to my direction. Very real problem.
yep.
Um, so I type that in. If say I'm just like a regular Joe, it would come back with some generic, hey, how this is how you do. First, congratulations on your promotion. Um, it's great. Understand that these problems occur with not just you. Here are some ways for you to get your colleagues to follow your direction. If you were at a company and a company has some specific rules on how to manage your employee, it would dish up the company's particular ways of how to manage your employee.
Now, how does it get that information? Because they hear the expression garbage in, garbage out. How would it get the kind of information to give you that advice?
So we take the company's HR training and regulatory documents. We put it in the system. We index it, and then the generative AI goes and looks at all of the documents, and maybe the information is in all three documents. It pulls it together and it summarizes it and comes up with like a simple English response. The way that if I had gone to an HR person that knows the HR training and regulatory rules would be able to explain it to me.
So, does this mean then that your business model is based toward going to companies? So it's a B2B and not a B2C?
It's a B. Yes, it's a
And I know it could change, but
it's a
for
B to
now,
B to C. So it's
okay.
so we're using for we say for employees, it's we're working with companies in the retail and restaurant space, because that's a space that we have lots of experience in. I'm a former Burger King and Subway franchisee space, and then we have after school programs which have teens that are 13 and older, and those are the people that we want to really get into the hands, get this into their
So you're
hands.
trying to use it for those 13 and older. Is it to deal with mental health issues, to deal with studying issues? What kinds of issues would the after school programs use it for?
It's to deal with the normal to be a teenager. I mean, I don't know about you, but being a teenager wasn't easy for me. I am always glad that my dad was there, and I spent a lot
Mhm.
of time with my dad, just kind of getting through the teenage years. Um, so to deal with normal teenage issues, helping them feel good about themselves, and then help them with their academic support, especially if their parents can't afford to buy them pay for high price tutors. And even if you go to an after school program, if you're lucky, you might get a 1 to 15 ratio. Still not enough
Mhm.
personalized attention to really help you excel. And sometimes the teachers might not know the answers to help you with your homework, and now you have this tool to help you.
Okay. So if I wanted to try Avatar Buddy, do I need to get a license? Do I buy it? How does this work? How are you going to make money from these people? Because you're not at this point, you're not trying to do ads, right? So not a premium or a freemium model. So the businesses buy it. Do they get a license and then they send it out to people? How do they get the information updated? So how would this work? Let's say I'm listening in and saying, I don't even want to wait to the end of this podcast. I want to know right now, how can I get some of this? How does somebody do that?
Well, you can go to our website, avatarbuddy.ai, and we
Hmm.
have a contact us link where you could send a request to get information.
Right.
And then
Hmm.
um, the way we're working is we partner with an organization, we negotiate the
Hmm.
number of licenses that they want, and then if there are at least 100 licenses, we give them their own personalized instance, and they put all their custom information in there, and only their employees have access to that information. We private label it for them, and then we work
Okay.
with them to ensure that the content is uploaded and show them how to use it. We've streamlined our process such that you can bring on board an organization in about 8 hours, 8 hours of effort.
Wow.
um,
Wow. That's unbelievable.
yeah.
But you're dealing with also after school programs and you're talking about kind of the daily life of being a teenager. Back when you and I were teenagers, life was hard, but it's a lot harder to be a teenager now. And the CDC and others have come out talking about really the mental health crisis where between guns and suicide as leading cause of death for young people, which is insane, right? How do you deal with the issues of being a teenager today without causing more harm? What are the guardrails you all have put into place to make sure? Because I imagine some people listening might say, I don't know if I want some kind of AI thing talking to a teenager. So, how do you make sure that it's a safe space and that it does what you intend. It doesn't have those unintended consequences we talked about earlier.
So, first of all, our product, we hired four psychologists trained with DI experience to help us train and give us advice on how to push this out. We have been using teens since 2019 to help us design and build and test our product. Last summer, we did a research project, and one of the questions was just also around, did our product create addictiveness? So our product is not addictive. Um, most, if not all, but most of the responses include encouraging you to go talk to a human. So go talk to your friend, go talk to your family member, go talk to your parents, go talk to your school counselor, and 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 when you think about like the mental health landscape, right? Most mental health problems start in 13, 14 year olds, but because it's as it looks like normal teenage behavior, it gets very
Right.
confusing for you to know, right? And so what this does is it gives a teenager that might be feeling different or uncomfortable with themselves, it gives them voice for them to feel comfortable to go talk to the adults in their life, um, in a way that's non-threatening, because you're practicing the conversation. You're telling your AI, hey, this happened today, I'm really embarrassed, and the AI says, I understand how you feel. That's It's okay to feel that way. Most people have this problem, or that's a new thing. um, have you thought about talking to your, and depending on what it is, right, it will tell you who to talk to. so so
Hmm.
so what it does is, it if you were having the startings of a mental health challenge, it creates a space for you to be comfortable to go talk to an adult so you can get help. Our tool is not, if you have mental health problems and you and known mental health problems, it's diagnosed, you're getting
Right.
treatment for it. Our product isn't designed for that. It's designed
Okay.
just to help you with everyday challenges, which, if not done properly, can blow into a big
Yeah.
issue. I'll just spend a few seconds more. When I was a teenager, I was on the heavy side, and my mom's this small little petite woman, and so she didn't understand why I had a problem with my body.
Hmm.
Um, but luckily for me, I had a teacher who was also on the heavy side, and she understood what I was how I was feeling. So I would
Right.
complain to my mom, and she would be like, "Ah, whatever." Right? I mean, because she doesn't have any frame of reference, and she's taking busy taking care of us. But for those people that don't have that teacher that I had, the AI provides that validation that it's okay, and then it encourages you to go find somebody, right? And
Hmm.
and it says this is how you can go find somebody, where you should look, and then if you're uncomfortable, it will even give you starter sentences.
Great. That's helpful because I think a lot of times people just don't know what to say. So when I picked up my phone, even though I have Do Not Disturb on, a New York Times headline popped up. This is the headline. So I want to see if you want to amend your answer. AI poses risk of extinction, industry leaders warn. Leaders from OpenAI, Google, DeepMind, Anthropic, and other AI labs warn that future systems could be as deadly as pandemics and nuclear weapons. So they are warning. This came out literally 2 minutes ago from the New York Times. Says a group of industry leaders is planning to warn on Tuesday, which is when we're recording this, that the artificial technology they are building may one day pose an existential threat to humanity and should be considered a societal risk on par with pandemic and nuclear wars. Okay, then. So one of the questions I was actually going to ask you was, as you may have seen, Sam Altman from OpenAI testify before Congress like last week or
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. Um, and he had some very thoughtful answers, as did a person from IBM and a professor. If you were testifying before Congress, knowing what you know now, and the Congress, I don't know if you watched the testimony, the
I did.
Congress people said, "What should we do?" Right now, hearing this, because it's from the people who are actually creating it. By the way, we're creating something that could be as dangerous as nuclear war or a pandemic. Carry on. What would you say to the regulators? Because what I always worry about is, and it's why I try to get my law students to say, you've got to understand this because you're the people that are going to be working with the people in Congress, the people in courts. So right now, Congress, China, the EU, other agencies are trying to figure out what do we do with this? And the tech industry is saying, yes, please regulate us. What would you say if you had a minute or two in front of Congress that would be on your wish list? And try to be specific if you can.
So I would say, as I previously said, that it can lead to doomsday. I
Mm-hmm.
think I laid out the plot for how it can get
Right.
to a point where it can be the end of humanity. So I maintain that, and I would say yes, it should be regulated. We should be careful, um, and but we shouldn't do blanket knee jerk regulation, which is what I believe that OpenAI and other companies are trying to do. They're saying, look, let's regulate this, but one of the things that these articles don't do, you have to read the article, and then you have to read the links to the other articles that they're referencing to really get what they're trying to say. So they're saying, like, look, if you're using generative AI to do mental health support, right? That should definitely be regulated. If you're
Right.
doing, if you're using generative AI to help fifth graders with their homework, eh, does it really need to be regulated? If 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 you're using generative AI to provide support to doctors to understand the new drugs out there, regulate it. If you're using
So
generative,
you're looking at a risk base. You're looking at a risk base, which is what the EU is looking. The EU has a whole
it,
risk
it,
base, whether a chatbot's at one level, things to do
it,
with privacy, or children at another level. So you would say focus on a risk-based approach. Is that right?
exactly. If you're using a chatbot to give you tips on how to have a for to like get this woman to date you, it's just like that. So we already kind of have like the society is already organized around. There's
Mhm.
already regulations and things around, right? Like nobody's saying you can't give your friend advice on dating. People are saying you can't give your friend advice on how to do cancer care. You know,
Right.
that already exists.
I get it.
And so I
Right.
think that that's important. That and I commend OpenAI because the way they're going about it is say, hey, let's regulate this on the front end so that when we get down this road, we're not doing this knee jerk thing where like what happened with social media. I mean, social media just
Section
became a business.
230, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the parallel they were making in Congress, which I think I'm glad they did it, because years ago when they put in Section 230, which regulates kind of platform providers and what they can be liable for, nobody knew the explosion of the internet would be this way. So now we're at this quote early stages. Um, it's really a good time to regulate, and I just hope that people do it right. But I want to pivot now from doomsday
Okay.
back to Avatar and you and your business. You took a pretty non-traditional approach to funding. And right now, as we're talking, probably wouldn't be hard to get any kind of funding for you because AI is all any venture capitalist wants to fund right now. But for those who are in the startup space or entrepreneur space, tell us a little bit about your funding model and how you chose to go this path. And would you do anything differently now?
So what I did was I was really, really lucky, and I have friends in my friend garden that are partnering with me. So the cost of running my business and the cost of creating my product is much, much less than it would otherwise be. So I have a friend that owns a company named WebAuthor. So if you're looking for custom software, please check out WebAuthor. Mario Rodriguez has been an amazing person, and he's building my software for free because he
And
believes
he's not going to do that for everybody else, by the way. So we are going to put a link to his site, but please don't say, Stephanie said you're
it,
going to build my stuff for free.
it, it, it,
But what's the value of that, though, for you? Because this was huge for you.
I mean, that's if I had to pay him, I would have had to pay him close to $700,000 to get the product that we have today. So that's an incredible investment. I have a marketing consultant. Again, she's helping me with my marketing. Since she started working with me, the way I talk about my product is so much more simplified. We've pivoted and changed. Um, we did a whole rechange the end of April, beginning of May. Almost killed myself in the process, but I'm really pleased with where we are on the other side of the pivot. Um, and again, right, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I value probably about $200,000-$300,000 worth of marketing consulting for free. So that's like almost $1 million worth of
Hmm.
business expenses that I didn't have to come out of pocket with, which meant that when I had to come out of pocket, it was I could self fund this. I have a friend that said, everything you touch turns to gold. I'm writing you a check. That's been incredibly helpful. And what I've been really good about is I have like I have long term friends that are
Your friend
experts.
garden that you
Yes,
talk
my
about.
friend garden that are experts in all these different things. So when I need advice, instead of having to pay a consultant, I can go ask my friend and they can give me pretty good advice and very supportive and helpful. Um,
Hmm.
so I think that I would say, like, don't underestimate the power of getting advice from some mentors and some coaching. Um, and if you don't have those people in your friend garden, go ask your friend that has those people in their
Yep.
friend garden, and have them borrow. I would say borrow some of their plants and plant it in your friend garden. These plants can easily
Right.
be planted in another place.
And that's important, right? Because you said you have long-term friends. People don't necessarily realize the importance of building relationships. And a lot of times we're so afraid to tell people what our dreams and hopes are because we're either afraid they're going to say, you can't do that, etc. Where if you don't ask, you don't get, right? And if you don't even say, hey, I know you do XYZ. Do you know anybody else who does this, who's willing to help or invest, etc.? But a lot of times people are like, well, I don't want to ask them and I don't want to bother them. But if you've built up that relationship, now again, you can't walk up to somebody you met at a happy hour and say, I hear you do this. I have a product. I need about $1 million. Let's talk about how we can work together for free,
No,
right? You've got to build it up and you've got to give before you get, right? And you've got to be the kind of person that your people in your friend garden know if they come to you, if you can't do it, you can point them to two or three other people who can. And in the age where people are super connected by social media, but really disconnected from actual people, I think it's a really important reminder that you've just given about the importance of tending that friend garden.
I,
So, how do you tend to yourself? Everybody, entrepreneurs, like you said, you almost killed yourself in the process with your latest pivot, right? And there's no entrepreneur, small business person, or even employee nowadays who's doing more with less that isn't, stressed to the max, pushing themselves too far. Do you have a specific routine, a morning routine or an evening routine, or something that is non-negotiable no matter how tired you are, you know, or you might be getting up late, but you're still going to do it, or you're too tired to even brush your teeth, but you're still going to do it? Is there anything that you do that keeps you centered, or do you just say, nope, I just go with the flow and see what happens?
no. I have a structured schedule, but I allow myself to sometimes get off schedule, and then when I then I but I have a then I can go back to that structured schedule. So my schedule is Monday through Friday. My mom and I go for a 3 mile walk. Takes about 40 minutes, so we're averaging a little bit over 13 minutes a mile. And she's in her 70s and she's still able to keep up.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Great.
I go for bike rides on Sunday. I try to do at least 4 hours. For a bike ride for
Wow.
me is about 48 miles because I ride about 12 miles an hour. And and so I do that. I have a lot of friends that I hang out with, so I make time to go to happy hour, go to dinner, go to lunch with my friends, just to talk about what we just to be. I host parties at my house occasionally,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then I have this friend that just has this calming effect on me. And when I'm like really, really, really stressed out, I'm like, hey, can I like stop by? I just need to hold your hand for 20 minutes. And the power of sitting there next to somebody and just physically holding their hand and just kind of like
Mm-hmm.
just be there, not even really talking about anything, or if you're talking about something, it's like of no importance, but just that energy transfer for me is
Right.
really, really key.
And you've again reinforced the power of connection, right? Physical connection, but also connecting with family members and going for the walk and friends. And I really think that's so important because the life of an entrepreneur can be very lonely.
Yeah.
And sometimes the temptation is, I don't have time for the friends and family. When I get up for air, I'll see them. But for you, it's actually been a benefit. So we're going to end here by asking you if there's one song or mantra or book or saying or something that really changed your life, that really inspired you, that you'd want to share, because the goal of this podcast is to empower, enlighten, and educate people, and to kind of have them really leave with at least one takeaway. And there's several here, but at least one takeaway that they can go away with and change their own lives. So, what would that be for you?
Um, when I read Sun Tzu, The Art of War, back in
Mm-hmm.
undergrad, and I read it in graduate school, then read it in when I started my corporate career. And I think I read it most recently about, I guess in 2021, I read it again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it really speaks to how do you show up and how do you win, right? So this is a war that we're waging. I'm waging a war because I want to make sure that marginalized people are part of the conversation, that they are
Right.
given their due. But if I just focus on the war, I might do things in the little battles that ensures that I never win the war. So
Mm.
one of the things that I practice a lot is, or two things that I would say that I got from Sun Tzu. One is hide in plain sight. So people expect that when you're hiding to go underground or something like that, so they go look for you under that. They don't expect that you're going to be bold enough to walk around in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
So hide in plain
Right.
sight, because then they don't expect you to do that, and they're not going to pay attention for that.
Right.
And the second thing is, sometimes it's okay to lose the battle because you want to win the war. And so
Right.
sometimes you need to be strategic, right? And intentionally lose the battle so that you can conserve resources to win the war, but also to give your opponent the idea that you're weaker than you actually are. Because again,
Yes.
if somebody thinks you're weak, they dismiss you. And my career has been littered with success stories because people have discounted me, and by the time they
Yes.
realized what was happening, they had no other choice but to join me or show who they really were as an individual.
I love that. And I think it is a superpower sometimes. People are like, well, you're a black female lawyer and only 5% of lawyers are black. And I used to be, a deputy general counsel of Fortune 500. I've always been like one of few. And like, that is a superpower because people never expect much of me. And so they set the bar so low. So it's so easy to impress them. And then it's true, right? And because like, well, who is this black woman coming to talk to me? And whether you're black or Latino or a woman or anybody, when you're underestimated and you're hiding in plain sight, you can really win the war. And it doesn't always have to be a battle, right? You want to get people to your side, but there is a benefit to like you said, hiding in plain sight and being underestimated. So those are super wise words. And again, Stephanie, we're going to put everything in the show notes, but for people who want to reach out to you, learn more about Avatar Buddy, learn more about you also do a lot of work which we didn't get into, so maybe we have a part two of this, about professional development and wealth building, for people of color. How can they reach out to you?
You can reach me at Stephanie at avatarbuddy.ai, and Stephanie is spelled the traditional way, Stephanie at avatar, AVATAR, one word, .ai. Or you can drop me a text, 305 479 4203. I'm happy to talk and knowledge share. I'll give you a half an hour if I feel like it's worth my effort. We'll expand it. If not, I lost a half an hour of
Wonderful.
my time, and usually I gain in the process anyway.
Excellent. So that's a very generous offer for you. So thank you so much, Stephanie, for being on. Everybody, make sure you go check out Avatar Buddy. It's really interesting. I've seen the iterations over the past year, and I'm looking forward to more to come. And what you're doing is showing the positive uses of AI. And right now, as you know, the headline I just read to you, there can be doom and gloom, but let's think about ways to use generative AI to become our best selves professionally and personally. And thanks for what you're putting out into the world, Stephanie. It was great having you on. And everybody stay tuned for the next episode of the Illuminating Wisdom podcast. Thanks again, Stephanie.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining us. Stay tuned for the next episode. If you like what you heard, subscribe and share it with others.